Welcome to the Safe Business Agility Podcast. This is the place to get advice, stories, perspectives, and updates about safe and related topics to help you work differently and build the future. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Today's guest is Aly Orloff from Lockheed Martin. She's going to talk to us about all things IP, her story, and of course, the importance of innovation. It's not just the planning part of the IP, but the innovation that most people miss the value of. So enjoy this one with Aly. She's got a lot of energy and she's one of my favorite people, and I think she'll be one of yours as well. Enjoy this one with Aly Orloff. All right, we're back here at Safe Summit to talk to one of my, you're like top 9 favorite people, I think.
The bottom of the top 9?
Oh, yeah. Bottom of the top 9.
Good to know my ranking.
We're going to talk to Aly. You don't know her yet, but you will, and you're going to love her. And if you know what's good for you, you're going to go check out the recordings from Safe Summit, because by the time this posts, well, what's it called?
Lightning Talk. I'm doing a lightning talk on out of the Twilight Zone and into the Flow Zone.
Out of the Twilight Zone.
Out of the Twilight Zone.
Specifically, the show Twilight Zone.
Specifically.
Love it.
Weirdly.
Okay, now that we know that you're weird,
definitely.
Tell us about you. How did you find yourself at Safe Summit 2023 in Nashville, aside from the fact that you're a local?
And besides the fact that I've been to more than one Safe Summit now.
I know, but you're at this one now.
Yes.
So how'd you get here?
I got in a car. I drove 40 minutes. No, just kidding. So with that in mind, I started on my career path in agility about 10 years ago. I started with process engineering. I started with lean, and I really, really love things with lean. There was a lot of things, though, that I recognized were wasteful, even though the goals were to remove waste, that we were adding some unnecessary steps in there. And I had a really, really good mentor that believed in me and saw the trends in society, the trends in technology, and was like, you need to learn about Agile. It's going to be something that I think you'll be satisfied with, because it's going to remove the things that you didn't like with being lean. So I had an opportunity to do an internal training at Cigna, and it was Leading Safe, and I fell in love. And I just went downhill from there, straight downhill.
And you went downhill with me and Dima.
I did, yep, which brought me to Boulder, Colorado, and getting to meet you. Yeah, it was in person in Boulder. And then I found you infectious, good or bad. I have yet to figure that one out.
I mean, the jury's still out. We'll see.
Yep. And so I instantly was like, I want to become an SPC, and I want Adam to teach my class. And that's what I did.
And was that the last class before we shut down? I'm trying to remember.
Actually, it might have. No, it was during shutdown.
It would have been early 2020. Mm-hmm. And now you're trying to bug me to get into the SPCT program that you're overly qualified for.
No, I'm not going to bug you. I'm going to constantly annoy you until you have to let me in, so you have to stop hearing from me.
But then if I let you in, I just hear from you more.
Irrelevant. I mean,
all right. You went from Cigna, you were working in healthcare, and now you're working in a space that we shall not speak of. Because it's uber secret.
We can say the name.
Okay,
I did get approval for that.
Sweet.
So I do work for Lockheed Martin, and I'm in the federal area.
Very cool. And you have a LACE that you're running. You're working on transformation?
Yes, we are working on transforming this public news. The program we're part of is called One LMX. And its goal is to unite all of Lockheed Martin. For those of you guys who don't know, Lockheed Martin is huge. We are 160,000 plus people, broken out by 4 different main areas. We're not just airplanes. I hear that all the time.
And the new Humvee replacement.
Yes. Actually, I do hear that one.
It's pretty cool.
Too. But we have a lot of cool things out there. I would suggest you look at our customer story out there about how we use SAFE inside of Lockheed Martin.
Very cool. Boy, a lot of years ago, I was subcontracted through Lockheed to a government agency. They were not ready for this yet, but that was a lot of years ago. It was interesting. And I mean, when I was first drawn to Lockheed as an aviation nerd, like it was all airplanes is what I thought, but there's so much more than they do. But I think, did they get out of, being a service provider to the government? Are they no longer doing systems modernization?
We do tons of work for the government.
Oh, so never mind. Still doing that stuff.
We do tons of work for the government. I mean, a lot of the times people forget we actually have the Blackhawk. The Blackhawk is one of our products that we actually have out there. Skunkworks, if you're familiar with Skunkworks.
I think everybody in this space is familiar with Skunkworks.
Yes, they should.
SR-71's my jam. I love that thing, even though it's super old.
I mean, but we also create things like missiles. We create products that are used on Navy.
Was the hypersonic a Lockheed piece?
Oh, that one I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, at any rate. And then, or was I thinking that what's the one that's magnetic drive? That one's I don't know what it's called, but it's basically there's no like rocket propulsion. It's basically two super powerful magnets, the railgun. That's what it is. So they basically have like a steel beam that through magnets they can shoot through literally anything.
I find out new products every day that we create.
Yeah, check it out. It's a railgun.
They actually created something that's very cool for fire detection, to use predictability analytics to be able to see where wildfires are likely to occur based off lightning strikes.
Weather patterns, lightning strikes.
So
that's really cool.
They actually notify the fire stations in advance, hey, this is a probability that you're going to have a forest fire.
I feel like that's a story they need to tell more. I mean, missiles
I had
and airplanes
no
are
idea.
cool, but like that's really cool.
No, it's cooler.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, not me.
Yeah, it's neat. And I mean, it's neat to see that we are not just, weapons of destruction.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
these are really
other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk about, like, you had your experiences in healthcare, and there's a lot of challenges there. I mean, I don't think anyone's surprised to hear that healthcare has challenges. I mean, if you look at Nashville, where we're sitting right now, I mean, this is like the mecca of health insurance providers. And, if y'all are listening, they haven't even started this stuff yet, right?
No, we're hugely underrepresented here. Even at the conference, I looked at the list. There's very
few Nashville natives. Yeah. And so it's a highly regulated space, and you list your excuses, right? But I mean, there's a case for them to modernize and to be more customer centric and all the things.
Their problems are different though, Adam.
Everyone's problems are different and also oddly the same. Well, at least the solutions to the problems.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about Lockheed. So when you walked in there, day one, bright-eyed, optimistic, what'd you see? Opportunity.
Opportunity, absolutely. I mean, there's so much room for growth. It's innovative. It's a different type of world. Seeing all of the smart people that have come together to create these things out of your dreams.
And that's what's interesting about a place like that. They're so creative and so innovative, but also people have been there for their entire careers. And they're also in other ways, they would probably say, our job is to challenge the status quo and all the things. But then when it comes to operations and how they get stuff done, it's still very much the way we've always done things.
Absolutely.
Have you ever tried to change an engineer's mind? It's not easy.
I try all the time.
So let's talk about, what was your first PI planning like when you were at Lockheed? Like, without going into specifics, I mean, did you have the pieces that you thought you needed in place to be successful?
No, I would say learning curve. But I mean, for my area that I popped in on for the first PI planning, they were newly set up. So, I mean, it's learning curve. There was a lot of lessons learned. And I think I look back at where they were then and where they are now. Leaps and bounds forward. For the area that I supported, they were brand new to doing anything Agile related. And we started out with the Safe for Teams. We did the quick launch. I would say they've moved forward leaps and bounds. But at the initial start, no. There's so many things you don't have that you don't realize that you don't have until you're kind of in that moment.
Sure. And then you iterate, you move forward, and life is good.
Absolutely.
But so is there anything that really jumps out at you that you were like, oh, we missed that? I really wish we had it. Anything you're fighting for now?
Pre-planning would be one. I mean, having the ability to have time for pre-planning and the ability to, I would say, allow people to be more innovative, have more time built in for innovation.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's two parts to that, right? So I think people often miss that there's the entire continuous exploration cadence that takes place in parallel to PI execution. So while, the teams are building the stuff that we committed to, there's this whole research activity that has to go on in parallel that helps us figure out, well, what are we building next? And that's, The portfolio might give us some strategic guidance, but then product management needs to go out and do their research and try and figure out, you know, what's the next most important thing, so that by the time we get to PI planning, you know, for one, there's not just a mad dash 2 weeks before to figure out what we're doing. Like, we should know. And we can also go into PI planning and come out with a plan that's a lot more achievable, right? I mean, it's not about how many stories are in the iteration. It's not about any of that. It's about, well, what are the objectives that we intend to complete to satisfy the intent of this whole PI? And I think a lot of organizations get so caught up in the execution, which historically that's what we've always done, right? We're most worried about, are you going to get the thing done? But we're moving faster. So it's not only about the things that we want to get done now, but it's about, well, what's the next most important thing? And I think a lot of people just miss that.
Absolutely. I would have said the same thing on that one.
And then, so the second piece of that, you talk about innovation, right? I mean, and kind of going in with, they're almost two symptoms of a similar thing, which is, if we're not doing continuous exploration, well, when do we try and get all this stuff defined? Well, we try and cram it in right before PI planning. And if you're trying to figure out what it is that you're going to plan, well, then you're probably not doing what's intended through the IP. So the innovation and planning iteration is intended to, I mean, it's PI planning, right? That's a big chunk of it. And then there's also the time for the teams to really focus and be creative. I mean, we want people to do that all day, every day. But then I kind of consider that space in the IP where it's safe to explore. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Absolutely. To look at what could be possible.
Yeah.
Not just what we have to do because we know we have to do it, but by truly stepping out and seeing what can we target next? What are we not planning for right now that can move us ahead and make sure that we're moving ahead of our competition? It's something that's crucial.
Does Lockheed really embrace that IP concept, or is that something you've kind of had to advocate for?
We're still advocating for that. And definitely it's hard to understand. The concept itself is something that is hard for people that have not been involved with SAFE to actually understand. What is an IP iteration? Why do we need it? What does it actually do to bring value to me as a leader? And especially now, let's complicate it with government and say, hey, we are ruled by our funding. We have our contracts in place that are written very, very strict. So how do we implement an IP iteration with those same guidelines in place?
Yeah, because they have to justify, well, how do we bill for that time?
Absolutely.
So, and that there's a few interesting things to that, right? So, I mean, there's the whole concept of, well, agile contracting, which is essentially mutually beneficial contracting. How do we, pay for outcomes? How are we absolutely transparent? And how do we, be honest about, well, what are the mutually beneficial components of this contract? And government's getting there, right? I mean, there's certain programs, and my experience with government has been, it's always the lesser funded agencies who are the most willing to try new things, because they have to be scrappy. If they want to get things done, if they want to get anything delivered, well, they have to be creative because they don't have a lot of money. And it was always interesting to me that it was the ones with the least that were willing to be the most creative. I don't know if it's because they had the least to lose or they wanted to get the most done. They just had a different driver, right? It's almost like a startup mentality. But the larger programs that have billions of dollars behind them, I mean, there's a lot of accounting scrutiny and all of those things, but it's almost as though they just don't want to change what they know because they know how to account for that revenue. And, what's good enough is good enough, even if it's not in the best interest of us all.
Absolutely. I was going to say the startup mentality. You have the startup mentality, which I don't know if it's that they have less to lose or they have more to prove.
That's a good perspective.
I mean, so I don't know if it's a less. I think they have more to prove compared to all these big companies that exist out there. These, Amazon, these Googles. I mean, these are huge companies. So these startups have to compete. And how they compete is by creating something that these larger corporations couldn't fathom.
And then they hope they get acquired.
Absolutely.
Well, and what's interesting is, I mean, we've seen the cracks in the armor, right? So if you look at, Meta's laid off a lot of people. They had to shut down their, was it not the augmented reality, the metaverse? They had to shut that whole thing down. Google's had to cut people in a very unceremonious way. So I think a lot of these organizations that we viewed as larger than life are proving that, well, no, they're just as capable of screwing up as everybody else is. So
yeah,
I
the
think
monoliths.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them are crumbling.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Apple's still doing all right.
Yes.
You're doing okay. So I would wonder if it's skunkworks, if it's a different mentality, because I think I feel like that's a little more of a space where innovation's a driver, but there's probably a little bit less scrutiny too. Because I think a lot of that, and correct me, is that government funded, or are those Lockheed innovation projects?
I think originally it was an innovation product,
Okay.
but I don't know now. I mean, because it's been around for so long.
That's true.
I don't know. I mean, but we do have innovation labs that work on,
Weird stuff.
mind-blowing things.
Yeah.
And I don't know where some of these ideas come from. But it's just that. It's an innovation lab. It's an innovation job. It's not everybody. It's not across the board giving everybody the ability to innovate.
I wrote a blog post about that a few years ago, and it was actually timed pretty poorly. I did a lot of work at Under Armour. I guess it's been 10 years now. And they had an innovation lab, and the whole purpose of that lab was to do innovative work, to test things, innovative stuff. And I wrote a blog post, and it was entitled, "It's Time to Close the Innovation Lab." Because when you confine innovation to just that space, well, what are you really saying to your team, right? You're saying, well, it's either I don't trust you, or you're not as creative as these special people, or any one of a lot of things. And it was kind of an awkward time, because the day that I published that post is the day Under Armour closed their innovation lab. And it wasn't because they were pushing innovation to the rest of the organization. It was a cost-cutting move. But that's it. I mean, innovation's not a thing. It's how we behave, right? And the way I always describe it to people is there's a very clear line that separates what's possible from what we perceive to be impossible. And what a lot of companies who say they're innovative, what they do is they look at what their competition's doing and do it just a little bit different, and they call that innovation, when it's not. It's one-upsmanship. You weren't creative. You just did what they did, but a little bit different. Innovation is charging at that wall that separates the possible from the impossible without being worried that you're probably going to fail. Right?
Absolutely.
So you charge that thing as fast as you possibly can. And the example I give is, not to be a SpaceX nerd, but SpaceX. SpaceX mission is to colonize Mars. They have failed. They haven't done that yet.
I've yet to see it.
But everything they've done in that pursuit, every time they crash into that wall, it produces something cool. So, now we've got reusable rockets. Now we've got that cool capsule that, instead of having all the dials and gauges, just has 3 big screens. And you've got a new spacesuit. And you've got all this stuff that is a byproduct of them having failed in the pursuit of what's impossible. And there's not a lot of companies that have the courage to try something like that.
No, it involves taking risk. And with risk, there sometimes is a reward, sometimes there's not. And that's accepting that culture of risk taking, that it's acceptable to take a risk to be able to learn from it.
And I wonder if it's really the companies and the executives who have become more risk adverse, or if it's how we reward them, right? So if you look at Wall Street, all an earnings call is how much money did you make from this quarter? And it's so short-sighted. You can't be innovative and drive results in a quarter, right? If you're trying to do something really hard, you're going to burn through a lot of cash. I mean, maybe you're profitable, maybe you're not, but you're going to burn through a lot of cash. And someday you're going to solve this amazing problem, and then that's where the revenue comes from. But most organizations and most boards and most investment groups, they don't have the appetite to wait for that. They want it now. So that leads us to this one-upsman culture. So I look at what somebody else did, that's profitable. If I do it a little bit different and create a slight differentiator, that I can take that revenue from their coffers and put it in mine. And it doesn't get us anywhere. And you bring up Lockheed and you bring up skunkworks. It blows my mind that in a period of 20 years, we went from a P-51 Mustang as being like the fastest aircraft we produced. Piston engine, prop, supercharged, whatever it was. Cool aircraft. And then in 1965 roundabout, we come out with the SR-71, which we're not producing anything that cool. I mean, we are. We don't see cool things like that today. Like, that is a truly revolutionary jump in technology. And everything that we've done since then is just evolutionary, right? It's a new iPhone, right? What's different between the 14 and the 15? Oh, well, you get a new camera and you get a little more memory in your glasses.
An extra camera.
Glass that's a little bit less breakable. But I mean, yeah, the back of mine's broke too.
Yeah, denied.
Yeah.
No.
So, but what are we really getting? Like, where is that next big evolution? And I just kind of blame it a little bit on the big banks, right? Like, you're so focused on the profit right now, you're not looking towards the wouldn't it be cool if. Like, where is our next revolution? I don't care about these small iterative evolutions. Like, where's our revolution? We've got to invest in that. We've got to have the guts to say, I'm going to bypass profit for the next 5 or 10 years because I want to see where this goes.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I mean, that's going to take risk, and that's going to take executive leadership across the board united to take those risks,
Sure.
to make that acceptable, to make the funding available, and to know that, hey, not every risk is going to pay off.
And that has to be okay. Like,
Yeah.
we have to be able to fail, and it's okay. If we learn something and it propels us forward in another way, we got to be cool with that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's why you see startups that will have this initial concept, and then they realize, hey, this doesn't work, or this isn't working the way we thought it was. So they scrap it and they end up changing into something completely new.
Or they don't, and they're out of business.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of founders too that are so married to this thing that it is that they're building that if it doesn't work out, well, they're just going to keep trying that same thing until they're out of money.
Well, I mean, there's still one Blockbuster left, so it's working.
Where's that? Is that in Oregon?
Yeah, I think
It's in someplace weird. Not that Oregon's weird. It's just like weird that there's Blockbuster there.
Random Blockbuster.
Yeah. But
hold on for dear life.
But just imagine, I mean, if, in hindsight, they could have bought Netflix so easy. They could be still so relevant. But I guess the rearview mirror is always easiest to see that.
Well, look at Kodak. They had an opportunity to buy Instagram that was nothing.
No.
I mean, they had 14 people when they were acquired.
For how many billions of dollars?
I mean, they could have bought them for next to nothing, and they had that opportunity.
But then you look at a company like
risk.
that, and you have to ask yourself, well, if they bought it, would they have known what to do with it? So I mean, that's it too. Like, there's a lot of ways to look at it, but it comes back to just having that initial appetite for risk. And I think for a lot of organizations, that IP is your first opportunity. It's so little. I mean, so if you are a utilization maximizing type of manager, you're freaking out. So I gotta get maximum utilization and whatever. Or you can look at it as, well, this is a small experiment. Like, well, what am I really risking here? And truthfully, you're talking like 6 days. You're risking 6 days because in the rest of the time you're planning, you're doing other things. And I guess in reality, you're risking a day or two to do like a hackathon or anything else. And like, we've seen some really cool ones. There was a bank I worked with who had an innovation lab. And when we did our first IP and hackathon there, the innovation team came in and actually they coached the hackathon. They're like, this is how you do this, and these are the risks you can take. And like, they actually encouraged them to be really creative and have fun. And to this day, they're still doing that. And that's really cool. There's just been a lot of really interesting things. Like, I even know at Scaled Agile, we've done some things. I heard at one point that career development, I mean, in an organization the size of ours, we're very flat. There's not a lot of clear career paths. So I heard that, and in a hackathon, I built this career counseling program, which was, okay, you want to do different things. You don't know how to get there, but there's probably people in the organization that are doing something you wish you were doing. Wouldn't it be cool if you could align with them and get that mentoring and get that coaching? So over a day period, we built skill libraries. We collected interest from people who would be willing to be career counselors. And it was just this really cool thing. And it was just quick, easy, solves immediate need, and it's scalable. So if you can invest a day and solve a real organizational challenge, why wouldn't you do that?
Oh, absolutely. How was your morale after you did that?
They were super pumped.
Because you solved a problem.
A problem that was meaningful to them as people. I think a lot of the times also hackathons are focused on, well, what can you do for us as an organization? And there's also the opportunity to say, well, hey, as an organization, we hear you. This is a problem you've identified. Like, let's work together. Like, how would you have us solve this? Let's do it. Let's spend a day and figure it out. And it's amazing how much you can get done in a very short amount of time when, again, you go back to, this is our clear objective. This is our what, this is our why. You help us figure out the how, and let's just get down and dirty in a day. Let's see what we can get done. And it's always empowering, and it's not all the demos are exciting because sometimes it's just some nerdy stuff and you're like, oh, cool, you reduce technical debt and that thing moves faster now. Okay. But it's meaningful. There's other demos that are super exciting. And then when you start building that into your culture, it's going to grow. It's not going to just stay there because people are attracted to things that are positive and good. So if they see you doing that thing, well, they want to do that thing. And then it starts becoming more of what we do, or I'm sorry, who we are as opposed to what we do.
It's part of the culture. You start ingraining that into the culture of your organization.
So what are your 3 tips, Aly? If somebody's like, meh, I don't need an IP, what are the 3 things you would give to somebody else to help them overcome that objection?
I'd have to say, when I look at the 3 things, I first want to give them a reason why they need to look at adopting an IP. And one of those things is showing them what happens when companies don't, when you don't take the time to innovate. So I really do think starting them out by showing what can improve is something very important, especially when you're trying to coach leadership and trying to get their buy-in, is you can't just show, hey, this IP iteration gives me some time for doing some planning. It gives me some time for, doing some training. You need to actually show the use case of what is the potential? What is my potential? And when you show that, you're also showing potential dollar signs in there. Hey, if we do this, this is our potential. Our potential here, we could grow our organization exponentially by actually taking some time and letting people look at the problems that we have or the problems that they have and trying to fix them. I mean, so that would be my number one.
So number 1 is why.
Why? Number 2, it goes back to planning. I see this time and time again with coaching is planning is kind of crammed into the first iteration. And you effectively just lost time to actually do the work that's so valuable.
Well, you did your IP anyway.
Yeah.
Even though we pretended that we didn't, we did it.
You did the P.
Yeah, you did the P part.
You did the P. Hopefully well.
Yeah.
Hopefully well. But I mean, you did the P part anyway. So I would say that showing them where that actually could go, you don't calculate that into your ability to deliver. You'll actually deliver more throughout your PI because you've taken that portion out of the way.
Sure.
You've also given yourself time to do that a little bit more effectively, doing pre-planning, allowing yourself to have pre-planning in there and delivering that complete planning package, not just trying to cram everything down the hallway in your last few days or first few days of your first iteration. I'd say the third thing that's really important to me when I try to talk about the IP iteration is morale. And the ability to recover. And recovery is key in any organization, especially with us being virtual. We have a huge amount of burnout. And if we are not allowing our employees time to recover, and that means to educate themselves. That doesn't mean, hey, they don't work. That's not what I'm saying. But it means giving them that ability to work on themselves, upskill themselves in whatever realm they're working in. It's going to benefit your company because if your employees upskill themselves, they're going to want to stay because they're given that opportunity. A lot of times I hear, and that's one of the resistance I hear is, and I'm not saying Lockheed specific at this point, but just from coaching in general is, well, if we upskill our people, we give them time to do that, they're just going to leave. No, they're going to be happier. They're happier. And when you have happy employees, guess what? Your products are going to be better because the people working on them care about what they're working on.
And the other side of that is if your people upskill and it's a skill that you value, you need to pay it. You need to pay them for it.
I would hope so.
You would hope so.
I mean,
I would hope so too.
I mean, nobody wants to work for free.
Well, Aly, this is good stuff. If people can't get enough of you, they're just like, I got to get more Aly. Where do they go to find you?
LinkedIn. Aly Orloff at LinkedIn. Find me.
Love it. Aly, thanks for the time. And again, be sure to check out Aly's lightning talk in Safe Studio underneath the Safe Summit 2023 Nashville archive. It's the only one that references
the Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone. And with that, we conclude the Twilight Zone. Aly, thanks again. See you soon.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. The entire team at Scaled Agile is focused on helping you be better at work so that you can help your enterprise be more successful in the new age of business. If there's anything else we can do to help, if there are any other assets you'd like to see, content, podcast guests, just let us know. Also, please check out Safe Studio, where you'll find tools, toolkits, resources, videos, and so much more to help you be successful in the world of work. As always, if you appreciate this content, the greatest compliment you can give us is a referral to a friend or colleague. And if you feel so inclined, we do always appreciate those likes, comments, subscribes, and reviews on your podcast platform of choice. My name is Adam Mattis. Until next time, as they say, stay safe.